Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in a series of GSA Snapshot Webinars. Today we'll be addressing the important questions around the latest global data on the sunsetting of 2G and 3G networks and the migration to 4G and 5G. During these 30-minute sessions, we dig into different topics of interest and draw on the depth and breadth of GSA research to provide insights into the current state of 4G and 5G networks, technologies, spectrum and devices globally. But first, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into today's event. We're joined by Joe Barrett, President of GSA, and Jordan Cox, supported by Simon Bryant and Luca Pierce from the GSA Research Team. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions using the Q&A function on the sidebar. Please do pose your questions as we go through, and Simon will put them to the team at the end of the session. The data presented today, including the latest GSA report on 2G and 3G network switch-offs, will be shared with you immediately following this event. You can also download the presentation at any point during this live event by moving your mouse over the slides and clicking on the download icon you'll see in the top right of the screen. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to dig into data including the number of operators that have already migrated 2G and 3G networks, and those in the process of doing so, and those planning to move, the disparities between regions and the pace of 2G and 3G network switch-offs, and the latest global data on 5G spectrum and network deployments. But to get things started, I'll first hand over to Joe Barrett, President of GSA, who will just share a few words on a brief update on GSA's activities.
Thank you, Richard. So hopefully everybody on the call is fairly clear about GSA, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that have happened over the past few months. We've been very pleased to announce that MediaTek have now joined the executive board. So we now have 9 of the major industry suppliers participating in GSA and supporting our work. So that's excellent news. And we've also now have 90 associate subscribers, so companies, regulators, operators, and also other suppliers, analyst companies, etc., that are subscribing to GSA's data. And over the past 6 years, we've expanded the scope of data. And next year, we plan to increase the amount of research and data that we are collecting and expanding the Gambod database to add new features. Obviously, this 2G, 3G sunsetting and switch off is a new area that we're reporting on, and we will have additional areas for next year. And just finally, I think we've been very pleased to announce new cooperations within the ITU, the ATU in Africa, and we already had agreement with CETEL in Latin America and Americas. And we've already applied and are applying for participation as an associate of the APT region as part of the ITU. So with that, I'll hand over to Jordan for the main information of this webinar. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jordan Cox. I am representing the GSA Research Team as part of our role as GSA's exclusive research partner at CCS Insight. Now, before we go into the figures, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction and background. So today I'll be showing you the latest figures from the GSA 2G, 3G switch-off report. These figures are from the latest round of updates to the report for October. And as attendees, you are some of the first people to see these new figures with the report published today on the GSA website. This hot topic report is still relatively new, and with the first edition released in July of this year. The data is continuously tracked and updated within our own internal database, ensuring any new completed or planned switch-offs are captured and reflected in the report. As this is such a hot area at the moment, we want to ensure for our effective data collection and reporting, we make this report the most trusted source of information on the topic. All data collected is public information collected across the world. Now, as a brief background, when 2G and 3G were first introduced into the market, they were transformational in their own way. They changed the way we communicated, lived, and worked. However, their importance has waned compared to newer LTE and 5G technologies, And as a result, many operators and governments are determining that the older 2G and 3G networks should be sunsetted. Now, diving into our first figures, the rate of ownership of both 4G or 5G compatible devices is continuing to increase, alongside decreasing usage rates for the older 2G and 3G technologies. Numerous operators and governments have realised this, and rather unsurprisingly, the rate of 2G, 3G switch-offs is therefore continuing to increase. So far, the GSA has counted 142 operators that have either completed, planned, or are currently in progress with their own 2G, 3G switch-offs. This is an increase of 7 from 135 operators in the last update for July. With T-Mobile US, Telkomsel in Indonesia, and Smart One in Hong Kong all announcing completed switch-offs in between July and October of this year. Alongside this, 97 operators have planned switch-offs for the coming months and years. Notably, one of the UK's largest networks, Vodafone, is planning to switch off both its 2G and 3G networks by the end of 2023. 8 operators currently have in-progress 2G, 3G switch-offs, such as Claro Colombia, which has delayed its 2G technology switch-off date to February of 2023. Now, the amount of planned 2G, 3G switch-offs points to an increasing level of activity over the coming years, and we expect many more plans to be announced over the coming months. Now, of course, this is not a short-term process, and even with the first 2G switch-offs taking place all the way back in 2015, only small amounts of activity were seen up until 2020. Between 2020 and 2022, an increasing number of switch-offs did occur, particularly 3G over its predecessor, with the first 3G switch-off by a US operator, AT&T, occurring in February of this year. This greater level of 3G phase-out compared to 2G technologies prior to 2025 may be due to factors such as 2G still supporting large, low-cost voice coverage, as well as its popularity for powering machine-to-machine and IoT applications. As can also be seen, between 2023 and 2024, the rate of switch-off is currently expected to decrease based on declared plans. However, by the end of 2025, many of the world's largest operators do have their own plans for switch-off, particularly for 2G technologies. 2025 is shaping up to be a major year for switch-offs, particularly in Europe, with major operators such as Vodafone, Orange, and Telia, and their multi-nation subsidiaries planning multiple switch-offs throughout the year. Asia too has its own plans, with announcements coming from the likes of Singapore, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Thailand, for operators such as Singtel, M1, and Telenor. The first 2G switch-offs occurred all the way back in 2015, in Macau to be precise, and since then, numerous more around the world have taken place. Countries such as the United States, China, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand have already seen completed 2G switch-offs. Specifically in the United States, 3 of the country's largest operators, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, have completed 2G switch-offs, with the latest being in 2020. The latest 2G switch-off overall has taken place in Hong Kong, with Smart One switching off their network only this month. Following China and the US, Europe is now accelerating the phasing out of 2G technology. The majority of the content is still only at the planning phase. Majority of the continent is still only at the planning phase, with 42 operators in 24 countries planning switch-offs. Only Hutchinson in Ireland and Swisscom in Switzerland have already completed switch-offs. As mentioned previously, 2025 looks to be the major year for European operators, with the likes of Vodafone and Orange planning switch-offs in much of the continent, in major markets such as Germany, Italy, and France. Now, the need for 2G still looks to be prevalent in numerous parts of the world, with much of Africa, Asia, and in particular South America seeing no planned or completed 2G networks. Only Claro Colombia in Colombia is currently in progress with a 2G network switch-off. This is due to a number of reasons. With a high number of users and devices still actively using 2G and 3G as opposed to 4G and 5G, the number may be just too high to justify phasing out 2G technology. The cost of phasing out 2G may also be too high for many South American operators, and therefore too risky to undertake. Now to give an overview for 3G, and although the picture for 3G does look very similar to that of 2G, the phase out of 3G began more recently in 2020 in countries such as India, Norway, Pakistan and the Netherlands, and points to the much faster moving 3G switch off. Like 2G, the United States and China have already completed 3G switch offs. However, Europe has also seen a number of completed switch offs too, with operators such as Telekom Deutschland in Germany, Vodafone Ziggo in the Netherlands, and Telia in Norway. 3G, by comparison, seems to be switching off at a faster pace than its predecessor due to factors such as 2G's usage in powering IoT applications and circuit switch voice services. Currently, 30 European operators are planning 3G switch-offs, compared with just 10 in Asia. Notably, with none outside of the United States in North or South America currently planning 3G switch-offs. Also compared to 2G, a larger portion of Asia has also completed 3G switch-offs, with major operators such as Airtel in India, KDDI in Japan, and Unicom in China completing switch-offs between 2020 and 2022. It does not stop there, with operators such as Bharti Airtel Lanka in Sri Lanka, Grameenphone in Bangladesh, and DTAV Trinet in Thailand, all planning the first 3G switch-offs in their respective countries between 2022 and 2026. With major phone markets such as China and India and their high number of 4G and 5G users demanding migration away from the less efficient and more costly 3G networks. Now, with Europe and Asia paving the way for the phase out of 3G, it has again shown the lack of either completed or planned switch-offs across Latin America and Africa, with only Nigeria so far completing a switch-off across the two continents. South America, again, for the same reasons as pointed out for 2G, is falling behind. And with the large number of 3G device users, this may take time to change for operators. And although 5G is the latest generation of wireless technology, it is shown that this does not necessarily mean that operators see it as the natural next step in phasing out their 2G and 3G technologies. As can be seen, 56% of operators have stated that they will be upgrading their networks to both 4G and 5G, particularly in Europe, which looks to have a preference for both technologies rather than one or the other. Currently, 32% of operators have stated that they will be upgrading to solely 4G, and this looks to be a popular option for Asian operators, with operators such as Bharti Airtel Lanka, Idea India, and Digi all stating that they will be migrating their networks to 4G only, again, potentially owing to the high usage rates for 4G devices. Only 10% of operators have stated that they will be migrating to solely 5G technology, with Celcom in Malaysia having already done so. With countries such as the United States, Denmark and Russia, all with operators planning to migrate to the latest generation technology by 2025. Now, when we look at the total number of operators with either a 4G or 5G technology mentioned as an upgrade technology, 4G again shows its dominance, with 90% of operators with stated upgrade technology as 4G, compared to 68% with 5G. So why are the majority upgrading to 5G? Well, as we can see from the chart on the right, most operators launched their 4G services between 2012 and 2016, and now have fully developed LTE services with a large customer base. 4G is a global success with over 6.6 billion subscriptions, with a total of 815 operators running both public mobile and fixed wireless access services worldwide. The 4G device ecosystem is also well established, with our Gambot database showing that there are over 21,000 4G mobile phones, routers, and IoT devices. With a fully developed 4G service and the majority of customers using this service, operators no longer need to support 2G, 3G, and 3G technologies, and can find significant efficiencies to provide greater capacity and spectrum to their 4G networks, as well as also improving cost efficiencies and meeting sustainability objectives. Now, 5G, on the other hand, is still developing, with a total of 228 operators in 92 countries and territories having launched 5G services. 505 operators are currently investing in 5G networks, and therefore by shutting down these 2G, 3G networks and spectrum, are better able to provide cost efficiencies to continue investing in these new networks and improving their coverage and capabilities. This extra capacity is needed for 5G as it provides a step up in user experience, enhancing demanding apps such as interactive TV, video blocking, gaming, and professional services. With 5G, the device ecosystem, whilst growing, still lags behind LTE, with GSA identifying just 1,227 commercial 5G devices by the end of September 2022. So this does hinder its development somewhat, particularly in the IoT space. However, the rising rate of adoption of both 4G and 5G devices will only serve to speed up the rate of switch off, as the adoption and use of 2G and 3G continues to wane, and operators and governments alike further feel the reducing value of the older service technologies. Now, of course, any migration to newer technologies comes with both opportunities and challenges. And the 2G, 3G switch off and migration to 4G and 5G is no different. Portions of the population may lack the means or want to migrate. This is particularly the case in emerging economies like in Africa and Latin America. Additionally, even in more developed economies, older generations of phone users may be more affected by 2G, 3G network closures, as they own a higher proportion of devices that need upgrading and replacing. And although the easy solution would be to offer upgrades on their current devices, this may not solve the issue. The newer 4G and 5G devices are becoming more and more technical as technology advances, causing older users issues when trying to operate them. Users may also have a lack of want to upgrade, and operators will need to navigate this carefully in order to encourage users to upgrade to 4G or 5G devices. Communicating effectively to inform of any network closures and handling customer interactions sensitively around this issue will be of key importance to operators going forward. The other significant challenge is the vast amounts of equipment used for 2G and 3G will now need to be upgraded or replaced. This is a big undertaking, and not only one with a large financial cost, but also potentially creates a significant sustainability cost. Whilst 4G and 5G equipment are more efficient in operation, the question will remain about what operators do with this old equipment. Will the equipment be recycled, or can it only be discarded? This applies not just to the RAN equipment, but also to the large number of devices which still support these older technologies, like some burglar alarms and smart meters and older mobile phones. Who is responsible for upgrading in this case? This is likely to highlight some key challenges and an area of focus for the industry. Finally, and another rather large potential challenge would likely be on the device support for voice. Once legacy 2G, 3G are switched off, there are no provisions for circuit switch voice. This presents challenges particularly with roaming and roaming SIMs. In addition, it also means that a requirement for VoLTE emerges. The deployment of either VoLTE or VoNA is a prerequisite for operators to make the full seamless migration to 4G and 5G networks, which could present challenges if an operator or device does not offer VoLTE capability. However, when we look at the state of VoLTE, we can see that this feature is very well developed and across much of the world. We have identified 262 operators that have launched VoLTE within 122 countries and territories, with a total of 289 operators investing in VoLTE within 132 countries and territories. Now, with VoLTE largely adopted globally, it puts the majority of the world's countries and many of its operators in a strong position to begin the switch off of 2G, 3G networks, particularly in Europe, North America, and much of Asia. However, where this challenge is most prominent is that in much of Africa, parts of Latin America, and Central Asia, some countries are still lacking any investment or launch of VoLTE networks and won't therefore be able to switch off 2G networks in the near future. In comparison to VoLTE, VoNA is very much still in its infancy. Currently, only 20 operators have announced that they are investing in VoNA, with only 8 having launched VoNA services in countries mainly in the United States and China, as well as Thailand, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. VoNA networks are still developing, but the majority of new 5G devices have VoNA capability now, and we'd expect the development of VoNA to continue ramping up alongside 5G standalone development. Overall, although there are some tricky challenges to navigate, the overwhelming technical, commercial and environmental benefits of moving away from legacy networks will see more operators in more countries continue this strategy across the world over the next few years. Here at the GSA, we will continue to track this market and its developments through our data collection and in future reports. Thank you for listening, and we will now move on to the Q&A session where I'll invite Simon and Luke to join. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you very much. Thanks, Jordan, for the presentation. We've had a huge number of questions sent to us during this session. We will endeavour to answer all the questions over the coming weeks. Today we'll answer as many as we can get through. I would say a general theme is about accessing the report and the presentation, which will be made available. Some information is about data that exists within the Gambod database as well, so you do need to be a member to access some of this. But I'll press on and answer some of the questions to Jordan. So the first question I've got here is, what 2G, 3G spectrum bands are being refarmed via sunset?
So where we have the information available, where we've been able to gather that sort of data, and then at least in Europe, it looks as though the 2100 megahertz on the 3G side is the spectrum that's been refarmed, and then on the 2G side, it looks more to be the 900 megahertz and 1800 megahertz spectrum bands.
Thank you. The next question we have here is, what legacy devices will be affected most by 2G, 3G sunset?
Yeah, and this is a key concern. You know, devices with only 2G that only support 2G or 3G will no longer be supported. That is, you know, why it was mentioned why operators need to very carefully manage the transition to switch off the networks. So, for example, in the UK, there are 25 million smart meters installed across the country, most of which are connected to 2G or 3G networks. And obviously, the cost of replacing these is astronomical. But alongside that, other form factors that could potentially be affected, or devices that could be affected, are older mobile phones, alarm systems, medical devices, and tablets also.
Okay, thank you very much. What can we do to negate the wasteful impact of the legacy device ecosystem?
Well, I would say this is more around reusing and recycling older equipment. You know, where possible, operators potentially can use their older equipment that they've used for 2G and 3G for their new 4G and 5G networks. But it's probably also worth mentioning that newer networks are more efficient. 4G and 5G networks are more efficient compared to their predecessors, and that in itself potentially, you know, solves a few sustainability issues and a few sustainability problems in itself.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a few questions about the different parts of the world and how long it will take some regions to switch off. When will the likes of Africa and Latin America begin to switch off more of their networks?
I would suspect probably several years after the likes of Europe and potentially North America as well. Operators in these markets, you know, they still gain a lot of revenue from 2G, 3G networks. They still have a large user base for these networks. And, you know, further to that, the price of modern smartphones are very high and could be potentially very prohibitive for users in those markets. You know, in Africa alone, 2G markets outnumber 2G networks outnumber 3G networks, and users are incentivized to remain on them due to their lower running costs, for example. And this is driving lower uptake of newer devices. And this is potentially pointing to a much longer period of low levels of sunsetting in Africa, at least.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we ask, what is the impact on 2G, 3G sunset when we think about roaming and roaming SIMs?
Yeah, and this may actually be another large reason why operators are tending to switch off 3G networks quicker than 2G networks. A potential issue that I can think of for roaming SIMs is the issue caused for travellers when they're visiting countries that have switched off 2G networks. This may cause issues in terms of connectivity when they are travelling between these countries. So yeah, ultimately users that connecting between countries when travelling, I would say that's quite a large issue for roaming SIMs.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we've got time for one or two more questions. What is the reason for the slowdown of network switching off 2G, 3G in 2023 and 2024?
This may be due to the, as was stated in the slides, 2025 looks to be the major year. It looks to be the year that many large operators such as, Vodafone, Orange, Telia and others, and O2, for example, are very much aiming for 2025. So it may be a case of a slight lull in the 2 years leading up to 2025 due to the fact that there's so many operators that are aiming for 2025 in itself.
Okay, thank you very much. There's questions around the list of operators that have switched off 2G, 3G networks that is in the report and also available on the Gambod database as well. So I'll just answer that one for you, Jordan. Maybe a final question is, how many networks operators globally, sorry, what's that question? Yeah, how many network operators are there globally, to put some of the numbers that we've talked about today in context?
I think for that, to get that sort of figure, I may have to get back to that one after the webinar itself.
That's okay.
Yeah, but in terms of, if I was to sort of say a general figure, I would still say there's quite a few more operators that still need to get a 2G, 3G network planned switch off.
Well, yeah, and sorry to put you on the spot there. We've just opened up the Gambod and we have 1,300 operators in the Gambod days globally. So that kind of gives an idea of the ceiling that we're talking about. I think we need to wrap it up there. There's a lot more questions, and we're really sorry if we haven't managed to get to your questions on this call, but we will be coming back to you. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, please get in touch with the GSA marketing team. Thanks very much.
Great stuff. Thank you. And I'll sort of close today's snapshot webinar by once again thanking you all for joining us today. As Jordan mentioned, after the event, you will receive a link to the webinar recording and to the supporting report, which is also available for download from gsacom.com. All the data you've seen today is taken from the GSA's Gambod database, as Simon intimated. It's a unique search analysis tool containing the most up-to-date information on 4G and 5G devices, networks, technologies, and spectrum. And as an industry resource, it's fully available to all employees of GSA executive and member companies, and to GSA associates, all 90 of them and counting, who subscribe to the service. As you can see, we have two events coming up in November. The first is being put on by our GSA Spectrum Group, and will bring together operators and regulators to discuss mid-band spectrum, the 5G opportunity, and with a particular focus on the Asia Pacific region. This then followed by the plenary of the GSA 4G 5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum, which brings together the whole fixed wireless access ecosystem to share experiences and best practice. For the latest updates on all GSA research activities and upcoming events, please do follow us on our social channels. You'll find the Global Mobile Suppliers Association on Twitter, LinkedIn, WeChat, and on Weibo. And if you visit gsacom.com, you can subscribe to our weekly Research Digest email and to new report notifications. So finally, on behalf of Joe, Jordan, and the rest of the GSA research team, all that remains is to say thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon at one of our future events. Many thanks.